I went back to school. I won't bore you with the story. I finished school. I wanted to serve. But as I was leaving school, something clicked inside me. I could write all the kind of code that everybody wanted me to write. I could solve problems. I had become a contractor for different companies, Etisalat at that time. I could make money. I could do whatever I wanted to do. I'd invested so much in myself. But I said to myself, no, this is not it. This has now become too simple. You will see in many stories I'll tell you how I hit. Some people say that you want to live an easy life. I have a motto that there's nobody that makes it in life that lives a soft life. That's my motto. So I run away from soft life. When I start to live a soft life, I feel like something is wrong. I'm not doing enough. So I said, what am I going to do? I'd watched a lot of Mission Impossible movies, and I'd read a lot of books, and I said I wanted to do AI. I remember I went to tell my dad, I'm going to do a master's in AI, and my father laughed. He said, he called his friends, and they were having dinner that day. He said, you will see this boy. Oh. Everybody is going to go and do masters in natural intelligence. My son says he wants to go and do artificial one. Nobody understood the dream at the time, but I'd read the books, and I said to him, you didn't have to pay. I walked my NYSC to Abuja, and I'll tell you the truth. I won't lie to you. And then when I got to Abuja, they sent me to this organization, and when I went there, they said, we don't need you. I said, perfect. All you need to do is, I don't want to be here anyways. I have a dream, because I knew that I needed to be prepared for a scholarship program the next year. How did I know that? I had applied for that scholarship. I had written the exams. They told me I was good enough. And this was a scholarship for robotics and AI. And this was in 2011, 2012. And I said to them, and when I got to the final panel meeting, they said, oh, you have good grades, you scored very well in your test, but we cannot take you into the scholarship. We're picking only 16 people in the world. You studied in Nigeria. We do not think that you have the required knowledge, base knowledge, to be able to undertake this master's in AI. The master's was between Southampton and Oxford. I was so offended. How dare you tell me, with everything that I've done, that I do not have the required and the requisite knowledge? Look at my grades. Look at what I know. So I went, my service year, I'll just go like twice a week. I didn't used to go, to be honest. I had bought this textbook in AI. There's a place in Abuja, as for many people who know Abuja very well, if you know Millennium Park in Abuja, that became my home. I would wake up there, I'll go to Millennium Park, I'll rent a mat, and I'll lie down and I'll read this book on AI. I covered that textbook in all of my service year. I covered it. That was the required reading in AI at the time. I covered it cover to cover 2 times. I reapplied for the same scholarship. Now, I like to do things like that. There were other scholarships, but I'm also a bit stubborn. I want to prove to you that the thing that you said I cannot do, I can actually do it. And so I went there, and they gave me the same story. You do not have the required knowledge, we know. And I said to them, I remember that panel interview. I said, this is the required reading for this course. Ask me any question in this textbook, and I will answer you. If I cannot answer you, do not take me in. They asked me a couple of questions in AI, depth first search, breadth first search. I was like, these are the easy stuff. And I answered. Very soon, I was on my way to the UK to undertake a master's in AI. At a time when nobody knew what AI was. Landed in the UK, familiarized myself with it. But I knew that I also wanted to do a PhD, because at the time, right now you can get away with doing a master's in AI. At that time, you couldn't. Because it was such a niche field, such a research-oriented field, that everything you were doing was at the boundaries. I knew I needed to get distinction, so by the time I got to the UK, I started doing the hard things as well. First semester, I was the best student in the faculty. I was like, yay, well done. That's not where it ends. Second semester, I became pompous. I was not going to class as much. I wasn't reading as much. There was this particular course I hated. And one of the things about AI is back in school, as I was studying engineering, I'd conditioned myself that I hated biology, I hated economics. So some of the things you learn when you're in engineering that you don't need these things. AI is a field that is at the intersection of so many fields. You can't get through it without doing biology or doing economics. In fact, one of the fundamentals of AI is where you start to think about game theory and game theoretic principles. They will tell you, game theory is the science of making smart decisions. How can you build machines that make smart decisions if you cannot infuse some of the economics principles into them? Second semester, I was faced with these things that I told myself that I hated, and I had to learn and overcome them. I dropped, second best student. They told me that only one person was going to get the PhD scholarship, and that person had to be the best student in the faculty. Then it was now project. Now I was number 2. I had dropped. Project, I said, give me the hardest project. I want to do something hard, something difficult. Then there was this project. There was this professor that everybody said, never work with this man. He's a very difficult man. And the man is also on a wheelchair. Everybody said, oh, the man has no joy. I said, I want him. And I went there, started working with this man. My project was gait recognition. How can you recognize human beings without seeing their faces? How can you create software that recognizes people by the way they walk? They wanted to put that in the UK airports at the time. I started working on it. It was such a difficult project, so difficult. It felt like I was mad. My uncle came to the UK, called my parents and said, please come and take your son. He's running crazy. Because I'll be on the streets and I'll be taking notes on how people are walking. Because I knew that I had to write code that was going to replicate things like that and find patterns for each human. I had done that. I had the best project. But it wasn't enough for me to overcome the deficit in my second semester. I graduated as the second best student in the faculty, missing it by 0.2. I was so sad. I got a job in London at the time. Very cushy job, lovely, lovely, lovely job. Everybody in my family were happy. I wasn't. But I knew I needed to do a PhD. That was where all roads, lines led. There's no way. I can't be happy. I was collecting very good money, to be honest. Even in today's money, it was very good. A typical person would be happy with it. After they paid me salary 1, salary 2, salary 3, I said, no, if I collect the salary a 4th time, I would throw away my dreams. So I packed my load, and I came back to Nigeria. I remember the look on my mother's face. Her enemies had caught up with her. Just couldn't understand. I'd come back. I was working in Federal University of Technology, Mina, as a teaching assistant. And also, I was doing research. My salary then was 70,000 naira a month. My parents couldn't understand. Everybody was sad. You had to be mad. But the thing about me is, I bet on myself. If I say I will do it, I will do everything possible. I will create an environment where I have no opportunity to fail. Coming back to Nigeria, I knew that was the decision. I sat back. A couple of friends also were in Nigeria at the time. There was Michael Ikpenyomi, who used to work at the Advanced Robotics Lab in Bristol, back here. We used to help fix military jets that were bad. All of us knew what we were doing. This guy knew what he was doing. I had another guy that guy was an expert coder at the time. Still one of the best you have in Nigeria. I was so lucky to be in a team with these people. And then we would work. And at night, I would apply for PhDs. Apply. I would do different tests. I'll tell you one of the tests. I remember I was sitting down, and one of the ones I passed anyways. And the interviewer said, look behind, because all I was looking for was a scholarship. I couldn't afford to pay for a PhD. I mean, I could, but I was not interested in paying. He said, look at the clock behind you. He said, it is 3:15. I said, yes. He said, what is the angle between the hour hand and the minute hand? Now, many people will be tempted to say 0, but I knew that that was not the answer. I had to think about it clearly. I knew it was 7.5 degrees. Those kinds of questions that you will face. You had no opportunity to prepare. Nobody was giving you a syllabus. You just had to show up and know exactly what you are doing. And that is what we prepare for, because that exactly is life. And I had applied for 25 scholarships. In the end, I had come second in 5 of them, and I had gotten 3 scholarships. 1, 2, I know you want to clap, but it's fine. But think about it. I had failed in what? In the others, about 16 others. I had failed. I didn't get it. And so the 3 scholarships I got was Newcastle University in the UK. Where's the MC? So I'll teach him how to pronounce that university. Okay. There's Université Grenoble-Alpes in France. And then there was University of Texas in the US. But I said to myself, one of my dreams in life is to come back to Nigeria and create and affect systems. How am I doing a master's or a PhD in UK or doing a PhD in this? The best place for me to do a PhD at that time was France. Why? Because it was in French. And it was a double PhD as well. I was going to be doing 2 at the same time. I like hard things. I packed my load and I headed to France. I thought I'd learned some French. By the time I got to the border, I used Duolingo. How many of us use Duolingo? By the time I got to the border, I knew that Duolingo doesn't help. They said English or French. I said speak French. And then they said some things. And I didn't understand. I knew that I was in trouble. And then I started feeling the pressure. But then I got into France. I will tell you, I won't bore you. It was the 3 hardest years of my life. Very hard years. I suffered. I feel like I could do hard things. There were days where I would cry. In my second year, I had very good grades. I had gone to Georgia Tech. I was teaching at Georgia Tech and doing research. I'd gone to the US. Right there, life was hard. It was very difficult. You wake up in the morning and all you can think about is problems. A PhD isn't master's. You don't have to pass an exam. You have to do something that somebody hasn't done before. And I had to go through this process. I remember when I stood to defend my PhD, it was 7 hours. 8 of the best professors in the world seated. I remember after standing for 7 hours and they said I should go so that they deliberate, do we give you the PhD or not? I was so exhausted, I went to the toilet and tears was just coming down my eyes. I remember I did not tell my parents I was graduating because even I didn't know if I was going to pass or fail. I knew that people knew that what I had done was exceptional work, but I didn't even trust myself. So my parents didn't even know that day was my graduation day. That day was my defense day. And I remember in France, the way they do it is you will stand, and then they'll tell you to come out, and your friends will be there, people will be there, and they will read a speech to you, and they say, we have found you worthy, you may take a bow. I mean, I told my friends I'm a hard guy. I've seen people cry on that day, but when they said you may take a bow, I remember as I took the bow, tears. Tears rushed down my eyes. But one thing had happened that day. I had conquered something that I had been planning for since 2010. A very hard thing, a very difficult thing. And when I graduated, I got a job in a startup as an AI expert in Paris. It was a very hard job. It was a very interesting job because how many of us they know how startups work? One person can be doing 6 things. That was how it was for me. I'd wake up in the morning, the same life, the same PhD life carried over, running helter-skelter. And I remember, then Sony came one day and said, oh, you guys are doing wonderful work. We're going to buy this startup. And that was how I left from the startup. I started working at Sony in Paris. That was also another tough work. But by this time, I was a bit more confident. I was becoming an expert. You know, I could walk into a room and somebody would say, yes, the expert is here. The confidence was coming. But the thing about me is when I get to that phase, I start looking for the next hard thing to do. And then I was working at Sony, and one day Spotify came and said, oh, we're looking for people to come and replicate this thing in Spotify. How many of us know ChatGPT, but for music? So let's do it. Let's go and create an AI that can play the piano. Let's go and create an AI that can play the bass guitar. How hard can it be? I ended up at Spotify. It was hard, but I'd mastered how to do hard things. Like I said, a lot of the things that is wrong with us now is we have been brought into this life of it is easy. And when people tell their stories, they don't tell you the struggles and the hard things they had to go through. There is nothing that is worth doing that comes easy. There's always something that is difficult, and you have to overcome it. And when you overcome that difficult thing, you have another difficult thing to overcome. But it is your job, and in getting to the point of your dreams, you have to understand that you have to overcome this hard thing. I have a friend who will always say something. He said to be rich is hard. It's to be poor is hard. He said, I choose to be rich. You know? And so when Spotify came, I was working 247 as well in Paris. It was very hard work as well. You know, Spotify had this thing, they would carry you. I was telling a friend of mine, we had to do some work. They packed all of us to Amsterdam. Now, I mean, people will hear, oh my God, you're going to Amsterdam, you're going to Paris. But I was there in Amsterdam, working from morning till night. You will sleep on the computer, wake up on the computer. Because they had put me in charge of a project that was so critical, because that project, they were going to use it to sue Apple. They wanted to sue Apple Music, and everything rested on my head. But I was confident and I was happy. And after I'd conquered that, I moved on. I'd done AI research. I had 3 patents. I'd come back to engineering. I was like, now let's do research and engineering together. And then I started doing products until I became head of AI in Spotify in Paris. When I became head of AI in Spotify in Paris, I was like, okay, now life is soft. You are now flying first class. You know, the hotels are easy. You just have to wake up and say, have you done what you're doing? Have you done what you're doing? I knew it was time to leave. So I stopped. And then I left. Sorry for and so I left. In between leaving, I had a couple of stints. I was head of AI at Endela. I was consulting for them. I was also head of AI at an American startup in Massachusetts, the Boston area. Was working with them, you know, just trying to help them. Those things lasted for, I think, between 3 to 6 months. Then at some point, I realized that it was time. It was time to come back to Nigeria and do the thing that I knew that I was destined to do. Not build AI in the West. I can build it and I can live a soft life. But come back here and build the things that we need. Because this is the point where we need it the most. We don't need ChatGPT. Oh, yeah, we do to be passing our assignments. But how are you going to build AI that would help healthcare? They don't have malaria in Paris. How do you help and build AI that would help with malaria? One of the things that had happened with COVID is that for the first time, people realized that they needed to nationalize both technology and medical resources. In Paris at the time, they had nationalized all the AI scientists. Everybody was working on COVID because they knew that the cure wasn't just hinged on the medical people alone, it was also hinged on technology. But then I had built myself to that point where I was needed. You have to do the hard things now. If you don't do the hard things now, you'll find yourself doing hard things later. You have to invest that time and do it now. So I came back to Nigeria. After a while, I came back. Now, a lot of times people tell me, you are such a strong person. How would you live soft life and come back to Nigeria? Now, I had also gotten to the point where I knew that impact had to be made here. But I also knew as a person that if Nigeria doesn't work for me, I just have to go and say, I'm ready, take me back. I made a mistake. But it had to work. So I came back to Nigeria. I started working on consulting, working at a startup, working on my own startup. And then I remember one of those days I flew to Lagos. And then a friend called me and said, oh, I'm working in this startup called Sabi. I have a problem. Also, by that time, I'd messed up. I had also gone back to school, and I did another master's in entrepreneurship and innovation from HEC in Paris. And so the person said, we have a problem. We don't understand how to build technology. I said, oh, we don't know how technology aligns with our business goals. I was like, oh, I have done everything in technology, from research to products to engineering. I write 12 programming languages. Don't worry, I'll come and help you. And I ended up in Lagos, and one of the things I do now is supporting companies and helping them to build. Every time, every moment of my life, every waking moment is either working my day job or going around and helping other companies to help them achieve, their dreams, to help them build their technology. I think my time is close to being up, right? Yeah. So I'm just going to end. There are many things that you will see from this story. Doing the hard things. Never running away from the critical core things. People will always say that we never understand engineering. What is engineering? We never use the YDX. One story that I said to somebody was this. If you don't use the YDX on a daily basis, then you don't understand it. I will tell you what it means. When somebody says, calculate the YDX of this function, What they are saying is it is easier to calculate how something changes than it is to understand what it is. When you tell somebody, and this person says, how is your birthday? And you say, I'm plus 1 year old. What you're telling somebody is, I'm not going to tell you my age, but I'm going to tell you the y, the x of my age, which is how my age has changed. And these are the principles. Everything that you learn has value. If you don't sit down and learn it, in the future, you will not be able to get value from it. Some of us have graduated from school, but we don't see the value that we have gotten. It is time to go back and make sure that the things that you were taught, you know it. Because those are the things that are stepping stones to your future. Now is the time to have grit. Now is the time to understand your purpose and follow it. It's not the time to run away. It is the time to have boldness and to have courage. Because that is only when you will be of value. Nigeria is not looking for people that are dependent on the country. We're looking for people that bring value. The only way that you bring value is if you build value. And now is the time to build value for yourselves and for the nation. Thank you very much.